It's exactly a quarter of a century since the end of working steam. Then two Black 5s hauled the return leg of the last steam train over the Settle and Carlisle. Today's rerun of that special makes another southbound ascent of Aysgill. This is Steam Video, Issue 10, the video magazine for the railway enthusiast. In this issue, news including a Caledonian liveried engine on the Strathspey Railway. The Midland and Great Northern Railway, a study of one of our most celebrated rural railways, both past and present. A railway festival, marking the end of steam on BR a quarter of a century ago. An A3 transformed, a famous performer in a livery which was last seen in 1963. Great Western practice, an authoritative and at times personal view of a railway which has always been considered a thing apart. And Steam Showcase, the best photography from the best cameramen. "25 years ago, thousands crowded the line side around Aysgill. On the 11th of August 1993, a more hardened variety of enthusiasts braved the line side to see a rerun of the 25th anniversary special. In appalling conditions, Duchess of Hamilton crosses Ribblehead Viaduct en route for Carlisle. The last steam train of 1968 had started from Liverpool Lime Street. A ban on locomotive-hauled trains on the Blackburn to Hellifield line prevented an exact rerun, so 1T57 began its journey from Leeds. Sadly, Britannia was not available for the rerun, so the Duchess substituted. With driving rain throughout the Settle and Carlisle, it's hardly surprising that the line side was largely deserted. Most had sought cover from the elements. This was all in stark contrast to the northbound run of 1968. Thankfully, the driving rain was to stop in the early afternoon. For the legions of photographers, there was a chance to dry out in readiness for the southbound ascent of Aysgill. Another non-availability and another substitution. This time in the form of Jubilee Bahamas, which had taken the place of Black 5 5407. The Jubilee is working with Black 5 44871 Sovereign. The Zetland Carlisle has seen an extensive programme of specials this summer, with operations virtually every Saturday. 2 weeks after this scene was taken, the Blackpool to Hellifield line was closed to locomotive hauled trains and Zetland Carlisle steam was diverted to run via Preston. Recently passed for main line work, IVAT 2MT made its first revenue-earning runs during the summer. 2 Sundays in August saw the maroon liveried IVAT in action on the Conforth to Barrow shuttles. These duties were shared with Stania 8F 48151. A one-off tour was made on the 24th of July from Conforth to the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway and return. On the private network, another new loco was to enter the operational field. Collet 042 tank number 1466 has returned to traffic after a lengthy overhaul at Didcot. This overhaul was due to have been completed in time for the Great Western Society's 30th anniversary. Sadly, this was missed by 2 years. However, the sight of the loco teamed with an auto coach and operating on the centre's branch line was well worth the wait. This oasis of Great Western branch line steam exists just a few hundred yards from the high-speed trains of today's railways. It's small wonder that this feature of the centre's activities has recently won an award. The summer has seen 2 centenaries on the private network. First came the Foxfield Railways with a special weekend of steam running on the 24th and 25th of July. The Foxfield Railway was built in 1893 to connect the Foxfield colliery with the Stoke to Derby main line. 26 years ago, the Preservation Society, which now operates the line, was formed. Chairman of the Foxfield Railway, Ronald Wally, explains.
Because the Foxfield Railway was built to carry mineral traffic, the Society has always emphasised its heritage, and that's reflected in the fact that all of our locomotives are ex-industry, from power stations, gasworks, collieries, you name it, we've got them. Also, to remind ourselves of this part of our heritage, we do periodically run freight trains along the length of the line in and amongst our passenger trains.
The centenary was celebrated by the operation of an intensive service of freight and passenger trains running the full length of the line. Also in action were 2 visiting engines closely associated with the area. The late summer saw another centenary, this time on a very different railway. Normally considered a backwater by enthusiasts, The North Norfolk Railway is seeing considerable activity this year in connection with the centenary celebrations for the Midland and Great Northern Railway. Rocket was on loan from the National Railway Museum for a total of 6 days of operation in late July, early August. During this period, the recently repaired replica would run a series of shuttles from the station, a distance of half a mile along the line. Early autumn saw the arrival of the Great Northern Railway J52 from the National Railway Museum for a spell of duty. "1247 is scheduled to work a total of 10 days during September. Meanwhile, another Anglian backwater is seeing activity. Black 5 45163 arrived on the Colne Valley Railway late in July and will undergo a full restoration. Most of the forthcoming work will be undertaken on the site. John Russell explains.
Initially we're doing all of the work to mainline standard, but if funds aren't forthcoming, we will just get it in sufficient running order to run it down here. But the intention is that we want a locomotive for the Colne Valley Railway, a mainline XBR.
The West Somerset has seen the first ever visit of an 8F. 48431 is on loan from the Keighley and Worth Valley for the summer season. Caledonian livery has returned to the Highlands this summer. Macintosh 812 class, number 828, has returned to steam and has had a summer of operations on the Strathspey Railway. Restored to Caledonian blue livery and lined out in black and white, this class dates from 1899. 828 has undergone an overhaul at the railway's workshops at Aviemore and has not worked since withdrawal by VR. Running from Aviemore to Boat-of-Garten, this Speyside line recreates the days of the remote and often forgotten Highland single-track lines. This line was, incidentally, closed to passenger traffic by BR in October 1965. The Cotswold Venturer is now a regular feature of the mainline scene. The train is running anti-clockwise around the Didcot, Oxford, Worcester and Swindon circuit. 6024 King Edward I was motive power for late August. Due to problems turning at Worcester, the King ran tender first from Worcester to Gloucester. The change of direction meant the King made an eastbound ascent of Sapperton Bank. A week later came a new performer on the Cotswold circuit in the shape of Tor Valley. Note the superb lower quadrant Great Western signal at the eastern end of the passing loop at Evesham. Bank Holiday Monday saw another return run from Nottingham to Skegness, with 80079 as motive power. The loco faced boiler first out of Skegness, providing some varied photographic opportunities through the somersaults. "80079 is scheduled for a double-headed run with sister engine 80080 on the Central Wales line in October. Finally, the Southern Railway S15 number 828 made her inaugural revenue-earning main line run in September, operating an Eastleigh to Yeovil special. This trip had been booked for 777 Salamiel, and the change of motive power caught many out. In fact, 828 wasn't due to make her mainline debut until the 9th of October. The run from Eastleigh to Yeovil and back was undertaken in a gale-force wind and driving rain. First of all, it's down to the southwest and the Launceston Steam Railway. This 2-foot gauge line runs for 2 miles along the track bed of the former London and North Western Padstow branch. A feature of the summer's operations has been double-heading. 2 cabless 040 quarry saddle tanks in the form of Lillian and Vellinhelly provided motive power. These Hunslet-built tanks date from 1883 and 1886. From the southwest to Wales, and everyday working narrow-gauge steam. This is the 1-foot 11 3/4-inch gauge Brecon Mountain Railway. This 062 well tank was built by Jung in 1908 and bears the name Graf Schwerin-Lowitz. Pant is the terminus of the line and also houses the workshops. The line runs for 2 miles to a temporary terminus at Pontstillech. The 30th anniversary of the Welshpool and Llanfire Railway was marked by a gala on the 4th and 5th of September. Hunslet number 14 is being prepared for the first train. Highlight of the gala was a freight train. Haulage is provided by the La Meuse locomotive from the Worms Hill and Bredgar Railway. In 1963, the line was rescued from oblivion by the Welshpool and Llanfire Railway Society. Today, this 8-mile line has a secure future.
This may seem a strange place to be starting a railway feature. I'm stood here in a village somewhere in England, at least 6 miles from the nearest railway, and in fact there hasn't been a railway in these parts for at least 30 years now. But this is the spiritual home of one of Britain's more celebrated smaller railways, which was founded exactly 100 years ago this year. I'm talking of course about the Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway, which has its spiritual home here in Melton Constable. The sign you're looking at depicts one of the Midland and Great Northern Railway's A-class 442 tanks, 3 of which were built here at Melton Constable in the railway works just a stone's throw from where I'm standing now. Well, it's a very familiar edifice. It has all the hallmarks of railway written all over it. This was the works of the Midland and Great Northern Railway. At about the turn of the century, this building was a repair workshop. It rebuilt locomotives. It even built the 3 A-class 442s that the railway, the only 3 locomotives the railway built for itself. 99 locomotives, that was the full extent of the M&GN rolling stock, and one time or another they all came in here. Let's go inside and see what still survives. Well, there are no tracks in here exactly, but if we look up at these piers here, we can see where the overhead mounted gantry crane used to roll for lifting heavy locomotive components, frames, wheels, boilers, that kind of thing. Today, the railway workshop is no more than an echoing warehouse where, in this particular workshop, some 3,000 tonnes of potatoes are stored for up to 8 months for forwarding on to processing plants for making us chips. It seems a bit of a humbling experience for a once proud railway workshop, but there it is. It's exactly 70 years since this building last echoed to the sound of hammers ringing and locomotive boilers being lifted, engines being repaired, rolling stock being mended. But there's a certain cold eeriness about this place. It's almost as if the ghost of the Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway still lives here somewhere. When the Midland and Great Northern decided to set up its headquarters here about 100 years ago, exactly 100 years ago, Melton Constable was little more than a sleepy village. It soon became the railway's headquarters, and lines fanned out in all 4 corners of the compass. To the south, the line ran to Norwich, to the west to Peterborough. In the east, the line ran to North Walsham and Great Yarmouth, and to the north it went out and around the coast to Holt and down to Sheringham, where the present-day North Norfolk recreates the image of the original Midland and Great Northern Railway. Well, here we are on Sheringham Station, the headquarters of the North Norfolk Railway. in this, the centenary year of the Midland and Great Northern Railway. And you can see on the platform there, platform 1, what for all the world looks like a British rail bus on its way to Melton Constable. Well, no, not so. The last BR train to Melton Constable ran in 1964, although British Rail didn't move out of Sheringham until 1967. And when I say moved out of Sheringham, I use that advisedly, because in fact BR has only really gone just a few yards beyond the end of the buffer stops here to a new platform built on the other side of what used to be a level crossing. It's an interesting and now historical fact that the Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway Society was formed in 1959, but in fact it wasn't until 6 years later that it was able to operate its first train services from Sheringham, and at that stage under licence from British Rail, because there was no light railway order in the railway's possession at that time. And so for quite a while Sheringham Station in that 6-year period became something of a storage base for the railway's locomotives and rolling stock. The Ginty we see here, 47383, is of course from the Severn Valley Railway, and paying its second visit to the railway in 3 years. It was of course here in 1991, and it's here this year specifically because as an LMS locomotive it fits in nicely with the M&GN centenary celebrations, insofar as the LMS and the LNER were co-partners in running the M&GN system after the grouping in 1923, and remained so until the eve of nationalisation, when the LNER took over. Well, I can guess what you're thinking. It's an austerity, and it's a Giesel ejector austerity as well, and perhaps for enthusiasts they're not the prettiest things in the world to look at. But this particular engine, which came to the North Norfolk Railway from Michael Colliery in Fife, has actually done a sterling job of work in the 5 or 6 years that it's been in regular traffic here. The locomotive has actually been quite extensively modified. The Giesel drafting system has been modified to suit the railway's purposes. It's been given a softer blast to help reduce the fire risk. The phosphor bronze bearings the locomotive was originally fitted with have been changed for white metal bearings, and it's very much now tailor-made to suit the North Norfolk Railway's purposes. I'm standing under the awning of what to all intents and purposes appears to be an original waiting room. Not so, in fact. This waiting shelter was built as a manpower services work programme in 1987, replacing the original and very similar waiting shelter that was demolished here at Weybourne in 1964, along with the signal box. So by the same token, the signal box is not original to Weybourne either. Where did the signal box come from? Well, that came from Holt, 2 3/4 miles up the line. In much the same way, the station footbridge is not original either. That came from Stowmarket on British Rail's Norwich to London main line. And although artefacts here at Weybourne have come from many different places, the railway has largely stayed true to the original preservation ideals of the Midland and Great Northern Railway Society. If you look around the station now, there's nothing particularly incongruous. It's very much in harmony with the M&GN of years gone by. Well, the words say Midland and Great Northern, but of course this is not a Midland and Great Northern locomotive. This is Harlaxton, a Hunslet 060 side tank which worked all its normal working life in Harlaxton quarries in Lincolnshire for Stewarts and Lloyds. The locomotive was repainted earlier this year to commemorate the centenary of the Midland and Great Northern Railway, and given the number 100 in commemoration of that, and was recommissioned on the railway in its new livery, which is incidentally called Golden Gorse, so named to match the gorse of the heathland around these parts, in July this year. Well, I'm stood here now inside the main workshop of the North Norfolk Railway at Weybourne. This two-road workshop looks after the railway's locomotive and carriage fleet. The locomotive behind me is the Hunslet 060 saddle tank Ring Haw, which has been a very sterling performer on the North Norfolk Railway for many, many years. If we move round over here, we can see the tender frames of the celebrated J15. It's not much to look at, but there's quite a substantial rebuild going on here. Sections of the frames and the drag box have been completely renewed, completely new metal fabric. Of course, all eyes at the moment, all attention is being focused upon the return of the B12 460, the only inside cylindered 460 in the country, although as we know it's not actually in the country because it's presently in East Germany undergoing a major overhaul. Well, the 1240 from Sheringham has just left Weybourne and is on its way now up the bank, the 1 mile or 1¼ miles of about 1 in 80, quite a stiff gradient for any locomotive. The Austerity now digging in on the bank on its way up here to Kellingheath, which is where we are, getting to grips with the rail on its way up to Holt, which is the terminus of the line. What we've seen today is a preserved 5¼ mile section of what was once a 160-mile system, and we really have to be grateful that the preservationists of the Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway Society had the initiative they did in 1959. It began with a grand plan to save the entire 160 miles. It quickly became clear that that would not be feasible, and so various options were mooted, not least of all a plan to restore or save the line between Norwich and Melton Constable. And if we look behind me here, you can see the line of fence posts that picks out the route of the railway on that very section, here from Melton back towards Sheringham and Norwich. If preservation hadn't happened the way it did, today's North Norfolk Railway could look just like this.
Rosegrove, Preston, Lostock Hall, Copy Pit. These are names which have become synonymous with the dying days of steam. 25 years later, that same region plays host to a line which recreates an era that ended so abruptly just a few miles away. It was perhaps logical that the burgeoning East Lancashire Railway should host some form of anniversary celebrations. So in early August, locomotives began appearing at a site near to Bolton Street Station. The intention had been to recreate the largest assembly of working steam since Rainhill in 1980. However, things hadn't gone exactly to the plans announced earlier in the year. The connection with the BR network via the 4-mile Haywood link was not completed on time. As a result, all stock had to be moved in by low loader. It was very much a case of will they or won't they in the weeks leading to the event, as some locomotives were withdrawn and others hurriedly substituted. It was yes to Bahamas and Black Prince, no to Duke of Gloucester and Sir Nigel Gresley.
How long is it going to take before it's possible to get in there?
One loco which did appear was Duchess of Sutherland, which had been released from the confines of Bressingham. The Duchess was the first on the site. During the month, she was joined by several new arrivals assembled in and around Buckley Wells shed. The main attraction for many was an intensive schedule of steam on the main line. The installation of new signalling equipment allowed an intensive service with both platforms in use at Bury for the first time. David Shepherd's 9F Black Prince was a star performer. 92203 had only just been out-chopped after an overhaul. Highlight of these runs was the pairing of Black Prince with the former Somerset and Dorset 7F. Is it really possible that a quarter of a century has elapsed since the end of working steam on BR? On Sunday, July the 25th, the convoy of caravans heading for the West Country was joined by over 100 tons of Pacific. An A3 was in action on the M5. Soon came the hardest grade, the notorious 1 in 12 of Telegraph Hill on the A380. The Pacific was destined to become a star attraction on the Torbay Railway for a series of runs during August. The repainting of 4472 Flying Scotsman into BR Brunswick green livery has long been on the agenda. The A3 was last seen in this in January 1963, when the loco was purchased by Alan Pegler. Its final run in BR ownership would be made to Doncaster, where the loco would be repainted and rebuilt with a single chimney. .60103 had become 4472. It would remain as such for around 30 years. And so, back to the Torbay Steam Railway. Flying Scotsman is no stranger to the Paynton to Kingswear line, having first appeared here in the early 70s when the locomotive returned from the USA. Transformation of the A3 has been completed by the addition of German-style smoke deflectors and a double chimney. 60103 is destined to make a tour of a number of preserved lines. Next will come the Gloucestershire and Warwickshire Railway, followed by the Llangollen, the Severn Valley and the Nene Valley Railways. The Great Western has, perhaps, created more passion and controversy among enthusiasts than any other railway. Love it or hate it, it was a thing apart. We invited Ron White to give a personal and at times critical view of some aspects of Great Western practice.
6024, King Edward I, an example of the largest 460s built by the Great Western Railway. This particular example was built in 1930. Building a 460 locomotive to this size involved certain design compromises, the most conspicuous of which is the front bogie, where, as you can see, the leading axle has the axle box externally, the rear axle has the axle box inside. This all arose out of an initial design fault, and the bogie as first designed was too stiff and would not go around curves easily. This led to a quite serious derailment at Midram with 6003 in the early part of its career. The other notable feature of the 460 design is the need for a narrow firebox, and when steam has to be produced at a rate to serve 4 cylinders, as in this example, the firebox had to be made exceptionally long, and it was always said that this was one of the lousiest jobs any Great Western fireman had, to get coal to the front of the box. Fortunately, coal was basically needed under the door, but at least the fire bars had to be covered at the front, and this required a throw of over 11 feet for each shovelful that went in. Add that to the fact that the Great Western shovel was of the muck-spreading variety and could carry up to 20 pounds of coal, and it will be seen that the Great Western fireman's job was not exactly a sinecure when running non-stop from Paddington to Penzance. In the cab of this locomotive, built in 1930, we're actually stepping back into a Victorian working environment, because if a Great Western engine driver who retired in 1899 was mysteriously brought back to 1993, he could be plonked down on this footplate and he would be immediately at home. The only thing which would fox him would be the modern oil apparatus and a speedometer, which was a luxury he wasn't used to. Any other railway could build a steam locomotive so that the driver could operate it sitting down, not the Great Western. You can reach the reverser sitting down, that is possible. The other controls which are required are the regulator. This, when opened by pulling towards, which of course you can't do when the loco is dead, admits steam to the cylinders. This actually is the best feature of a Great Western locomotive, because unlike so many other railways, there is fine control on a Great Western regulator, and Great Western locos didn't often slip on starting. The other control we need is the brake. Now, it's desirable to see where you're going when you put the brakes on. I have arms like an ape, but I can't reach the brake lever when I'm sitting down. I have got to get up to operate it. And when I'm standing up to operate it, I can't see out of the windows. I'm too tall. If I want to put the brake on when the loco is going backwards, I have got to turn around, operate it with the wrong hand, sit down, and I can just about reach it. It's flapping loosely. This normally, when the loco is in steam, moves rather more stiffly. To blow the whistle, I'm okay. I can just reach the chain. In the old days, there wasn't even a chain, and you had to get up to operate a lever, which again meant standing up. The Great Western, I think, was a believer that work could only be done efficiently if you were standing up and therefore alert. They seemed terrified that if any of their drivers sat down to operate a control, he would instantly fall asleep. The Great Western Coal Stage was itself an individual structure. All the other railways were perfectly happy to drop coal into the tenders and bunkers from a great height, from concrete coaling plants known, oddly enough, by the names of cenotaphs, but not the Great Western. The Great Western said, we use Welsh coal, which is very friable. This must not be dropped from a great height, otherwise it will crumble into dust and be no use to man or beast. In this case, the coal has to be brought up a ramp by wagon and go in through the back of the coaling plant, where it is offloaded by hand into little tubs carrying half a ton. These tubs are then run on rails to the dropping point here. These two flaps, which we can see under the shelter, are in fact hinged, and the safety weight at the bottom brings them back up to the safety position when no tubs are in position. The tubs are pushed forward, they push it down, the wheels of the tubs are held on safety hooks, and they are then lifted by 1 or 2 men to drop the coal into the tender or the bunker of the loco waiting below. And as we saw from the coaling of 1466, where you have a small bunkered locomotive, this has to be very precise because the width of the tub is approximately the width of the bunker. If you're 2 foot out, you tip the coal straight onto the track. In the Great Western hierarchy of locomotives, 5572 is one of the success stories. These were delightful little branch engines, infinitely better than things of comparable size on the LMS and LNER. They were willing to run. You could gallop along with these things up to 70 miles an hour on these small wheels and make a joyous chirruping noise as they went. The Great Western didn't often get things spectacularly wrong, but with the 20 Manners that were built just before the war, for once standardisation let them down. The combination of boiler and cylinders and blast pipe was totally wrong. And before the war, these really were insipid things. They were barely capable of pulling the skin off a rice pudding, let alone a train on the Cambrian line. And it wasn't until the 1950s, when Sam L got into operation at Swindon, that the drafting was really substantially improved. With a smaller chimney and a rear-range blast pipe, the boiler then started to produce steam at roughly twice the rate it was capable of doing before the war, and the locos then actually became genuinely useful, and they served right through to the end of steam on the Cambrian line. Although in a state of undress, this is really a most important loco in the progress of Great Westernry. The first loco built by Swindon to a set of standard parts, where the drawing office was simply said, use the standard boiler number so-and-so, use the standard wheels so-and-so, use standard cylinders so-and-so, put it all together and come up with a 260 locomotive, and this is what they did. The Great Western hierarchy, coming down the line from Gooch, the Armstrongs through Churchwood, had always been locomotive oriented, but when Churchwood retired, the job was given to Collett, who was a workshop trained man, and it was about this time in the career of the railway that things started to go slightly wrong. The Castle's 4-cylinder 460s were never quite as successful as they should have been, and the problem really lay within the front end of the loco, where by this time the valves were not quite in perfect proportion with the cylinders as they had been on the 4-cylinder Stars. And the design of the valve gear to operate the inside valves was not totally well thought out. It gave constant problems with spindles and glands, and any contemporary pictures will always show a fog of steam around the front end. In their single chimney form as they were built, they were perfectly capable of moving trains at a reasonable rate of knots, fairly light trains admittedly, but after the war, when coal became a problem, then they started to get into trouble, and it was eventually necessary to do a fairly comprehensive rebuilding of the front end with larger superheat, with double chimney, but it still left them hamstrung with valve events never quite as good as they should have been.
First of all, it's north to the Highlands and the Strathspey Railway. This line has considerable photographic potential, but is often overlooked. In contrast, the North York moors received saturation coverage. Heavy rain had fallen in the days before this shot was taken. This was one of the few fine days in an otherwise dismal summer. Incidentally, the uncharacteristic sound is from a Deltic waiting in the tunnel for access to the station. The sheltered English Riviera can normally guarantee some reasonable summer weather. The combination of 60103, steep gradients and superb scenery was an unbeatable attraction. The splendor of industrial steam working flat out, a perfect recreation of a bygone era. A single clear view through an avenue of trees. Such vantage points are now rare on many steam routes, and vegetation obscures many a view. This is the Cotswold Venturer with 6024 King Edward I in charge on the Oxford to Worcester line. The Settlement Carlisle is one of the few lines which offers any reasonable opportunities for long panning shots. Try this on the Oxford to Worcester line. The combination of red coaches and a red engine, together with a high vantage point, produces pictures more in keeping with a model railway. The occasion is 46441's main line debut. Finally, the same loco crosses the turbulent waters of Morecambe Bay en route for Barrow.